What is happening, everyone? Happy Thanksgiving and welcome back to episode 22 of Manny's Food Channel. It's your boy Mansoor, aka Manny, and for today's episode I'm going to be making a Thanksgiving style dinner. But rather than going with the traditional route of making turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and roasted veg, I'm going to be putting a Mediterranean and a Middle Eastern kind of twist to Thanksgiving dinner. So on today's menu, I'm going to be making a Zatar roasted chicken, along with basmati rice, raisins, barberry, and almond stuffing, along with a side gravy. Now, there is a bit of step to it, and it does require a bit of time, but as usual, it will result in absolute deliciousness. So without further ado, let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off with the brine. Now the reason we're brining the chicken first is to add a little bit of moisture, seasoning into the chicken. So first what I'm going to do in this pot here, I have about half of the weight of the chicken of water. Next up I'm going to throw in thinly sliced lemon, about just one lemon. Next I'm going to add in salt, and the salt is weighted with the water here as well as the weight of the chicken, which I'll put in the description. Next, I'm gonna add some thyme, bay leaves, and peppercorn. And then finally, some garlic cloves. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this to a quick boil. I'm not gonna boil it for too long, probably 2 to 3 minutes. Then we're gonna take it off heat. And then we're gonna add ice into this brine. So the reason I added ice here is for two reasons. The first reason is to cool it down as soon as possible. That way we don't have to wait for the brine to cool down so we can add the chicken in. And second, it's to add more liquid. If we added this amount of liquid that we have in this bowl right now and we decided to take it off heat, it's going to take a while to cool. So I decided to work smart a little bit, add some salt, add some ice in here, so that way it cools off as soon as possible, but at the same time add in some more liquid in here. And now I'm going to let this cool down for probably 5 minutes or so. Then I'm going to add in the chicken and let it brine for an hour. Typically, I would prefer to brine it for at least a day. If you have that kind of time, brine it for a day, but an hour is definitely good too. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the chicken in a bowl. This one I got from my butcher. It's all tied up, ready to go. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly pour in the brine, just enough to cover the whole chicken. And then I'm going to leave it at room temperature as it's brining, because I'm going to cook it within the hour. But if you're not going to do that, then you can put it in the fridge overnight. Now I'm going to let this sit for an hour, and then we're going to move on to making our Zatar mix for the roast chicken. So I'm going to intensify this Zatar mix with a couple more spices. I'm going to use a pestle mortar, but if you don't have a pestle mortar or you don't want to use a pestle mortar, then you can certainly use a coffee grinder or a spice grinder. So what I have here are just some toasted coriander and cumin. I'm going to quickly crush this up. So next up, I'm going to add in some oregano. Some dried thyme. Some sumac. Some sesame seeds, and finally some salt and pepper. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate half of this mix, or actually probably around 3/4, and I'm going to set aside 1/4 of the spice, so that way we can spread some more on when we're adding it to the chicken. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some olive oil and give this a really nice mix. Now I'm going to be adding in a lot of oil, probably around 2 cups. Reason being is because I want some of the drippings and some of that flavoring to go inside the roasted veg, so that way when we make the gravy, some of that flavor's in there. So I'm just going to give this a really quick mix. You can see it's very liquidy. and let it sit for around 5 minutes to infuse some of that flavor into the oil. And in the meantime, we're gonna remove the chicken from the brine, cut up the veg, and we can start adding the Za'atar mix and put it in the oven. So to prepare the roast for the veg, first I'm going to just roughly chop all these vegetables, the carrots, the celery, and the onions. They don't have to be perfect, just roughly chop because we're gonna roast them underneath. So that way when the juices of the chicken falls to the roasted veg, it adds more flavor to the veg. And ultimately will add to the depth of flavor in the gravy as well. So I'm gonna cut up the carrots, followed by the onions, and then the celery. Now I'm gonna put the chicken roast together. I'm gonna take this veg and evenly distribute it at the bottom. The carrots, the onions, the celeries, flatten it out. And then next up, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some garlic, some rosemary, and some thyme. I wanna cook off this veg so it has a nice roasted flavor to it, so that way when we cook the gravy, that also contributes to the taste of the gravy as well. Next, I'm gonna put this roasting tray on top. Place it nicely so it doesn't move around when it's cooking. Then I'm gonna take the chicken. I removed it from the brine, dried it up with some paper towel. And I'm just going to try and separate the skin from the chicken breast away from the meat, because I'm gonna put a knob of butter in there to keep the chicken breast moist. And just be careful while you're doing that not to rip the skin or break the skin. So all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take some pieces of butter and just place it nicely into the chicken breast and slowly massage its way all the way around to evenly distribute the butter. Next up, I'm gonna add a lemon inside. One reason is to hold the chicken shape while it's cooking. And the other reason is to also, once it's cooked, remove the lemon and add it to the gravy. So that way it contributes some flavor as well, but also holds the shape for the chicken, and the chicken cooks evenly all the way through. Next, I'm gonna grab this Zatar mix that we made earlier and just slowly brush it all the way around until we cover all the surfaces of the chicken. And any excess Zatar mix that you do have, you can just throw it in there to add more flavor to the gravy as well. Next up, I'm just going to drizzle a touch of olive oil around the chicken. That way we can keep the vegetables around the chicken moist. Finally, the Zatar mix, or the dry Zatar mix that we didn't add into the oil, we're going to take some of that and just sprinkle on some more. Just on the top there. So that way any of the mix that rubbed off or slipped into the roasted veg and stay on top of the chicken. So now I'm going to put the chicken in the oven to cook for at least an hour at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to check it around an hour to see whether or not it's cooked, but I'm going to take it out at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. The chicken has to cook to 165 degrees, but the carryover cooking will help it cook the rest. So in the meantime, we're going to move on to working on our stuffing. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to small dice some onions. One of the reasons why I'm not stuffing the chicken itself is because if the blood goes into the stuffing, it might not cook all the way through. And on top of that, sometimes the stuffing itself, if there's too much of it, it doesn't cook. Unless you're using a small game bird, you can certainly stuff it like a Cornish hen, but otherwise I wouldn't stuff it. So I'm gonna cook the stuffing on the side. I'm just gonna small dice these onions and then grate some garlic. So to start off, we're gonna add in some olive oil into the pot. Evenly distribute the oil amongst the whole surface of the pot or pan that you're using. And then we're gonna start sweating off the onions. And we just wanna sweat them off until they become translucent before we add in the garlic. I've let these onions cooked off for around 5 minutes or so. They're starting to become translucent. Now I'm going to add in the garlic. And I'm going to cook both of these off until the onions start to turn golden brown. I want a very nice, like, charred golden brown. And then we'll continue to add on the rest of the spices, the basmati rice, as well as the chicken stock. Next up, I'm going to add in the basmati rice. Now I'm going to add in some salt and pepper. And this here is a spice blend of different kind of spices. In Iran, we call this advieh. Sometimes it has cinnamon, cloves, garlic, some coriander, some saffron, depends on what region or what kind of spices you like to put in it. But I will put it in the description below what kind of spices are in this spice blend here. It's very easy to make. But this is where all the flavor is added into the rice. And then finally what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add in some chicken stock. And then I'm going to let this cook for around 20 minutes on medium to low heat, until all the stock is absorbed, and I'll continue to add the rest of the garnishes and the ingredients as well. Alright, so the stock is almost all absorbed. It's been around 20 minutes or so, so we'll have a look. The rice is ready now. Most of the stock is absorbed here. So just grab a fork and start fluffing the rice. At this point I'm going to turn off the rice because I'll just let the steam and the leftover residual heat cook the stuffing all the way through. So now I'm just going to add in the rest of the ingredients. I'm going to add some slivered almonds, some zeresh, or a substitute will be sour cherries. Add in some golden raisins. If you don't like raisins, you can omit this step. Or if you want to add in any other kind of raisins, you can certainly do that. And then finally, I'm going to add in some lime juice. This is fresh lime juice. And then give it a mix. And just before we set this aside and take a look at our chicken, see how it's doing, I'm going to add in some saffron. That's been steeping in warm water for around 10 minutes or so. Don't waste any of the saffron. If you have some more left over, put a little bit of rice in there and make sure you extract all the saffron that's in that cup or bowl that you're using. And then give this a really nice mix and fluff up the rice. And now we'll put the lid back on, let it steam the rest of the way, and we'll have a look at the chicken to see how it's doing. Look at how delicious that looks. Nice and golden brown all the way through. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this from the roasting rack. Let the chicken rest for around 20 minutes to half an hour so the juices settle back into the chicken. In the meantime, we're going to work on the gravy itself. So because there's a lot of flavor in this roasting pan, I'm not going to remove it out of this pan. I'm gonna cook the gravy in here, and then after that we're gonna strain it. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some white wine to deglaze the bottom of the pan. If you don't drink or you don't like white wine, then you can omit this step and use stock to deglaze the pan. But I'm going to add in some white wine and give this a quick mix. I'm gonna let this reduce for a little bit, and I'm gonna grab a potato masher or something to mash up all this veg in order to extract the maximum amount of flavor from all these roasted veg here. Now what I'm gonna do is I remove the lemon that was inside the chicken, and then I'm just gonna open it up and squeeze out all that juice. It's got a lot of flavor in the lemon, so I'm just gonna squeeze out as much acidity as I can out of the lemon, and then I'm gonna add in the chicken stock. So now I've reduced the wine by around half. I'm gonna toss in the chicken stock, and I'm also gonna reduce this by half or until it starts to really thicken up and it's got a nice consistency like gravy. So I'll let the stock reduce by around half. Now I'm going to strain it into a different pot. Just be careful, it's extremely hot. And strain off all the juices. And if you like to keep all the vegetables, you can save them, or you can discard them, completely up to you. I'm just going to save the carrots and then discard everything else. Alright, so to finish off the gravy, I'm gonna make a quick slurry to thicken up the gravy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put equal parts of butter and flour in a pot, and that's equal parts in weight. I'm just gonna quickly melt this off, and then I'm gonna throw in some flour. And then make sure you mix it and cook off all the flour before you add in all the reduced gravy. So I'm just gonna cook this off for probably a minute or two, and then we'll slowly add in batches the gravy. So you'll know once the gravy is ready, once you have a nice shine to the gravy as well as all the lumps are removed. This would be the time to season it with salt and pepper or any other seasoning that you want before you start plating and you can serve. Now, what I really enjoy about Thanksgiving dinner is getting together with your friends and family and really having a good time and catching up. But matched by that is the amazingly delicious food that's being served with it, where you definitely will overeat and put you into a coma right after. And this is definitely one of those recipes that will do that for you and match all those criteria. But without further ado, time for the taste test. Cheers. It's very delicious. The chicken's very moist. The Zatar spice that I put on the roasted chicken definitely adds a different dimension and different kind of flavor profile that you wouldn't normally associate with Thanksgiving. And the stuffing really kind of just brings it all together and balances out the dish really nicely. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, please give my video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Happy Thanksgiving, and I look forward to seeing everyone next time.